Hey, you have Patrick Findaro here, co-founder at Visa Franchise and Vetted Biz. As many of you might know, for the last 7 years, we've been helping folks from around the world find and analyze businesses, mostly franchises that are eligible for the E-2 investor visa. Today, I'm very excited to have on Larry Behar, an attorney I've known since maybe 2013 when I was at a prior firm before starting Visa Franchise with my brother Jack. He has a flawless track record with our clients. 100% approval first time in the consulate. So I mean, he has been doing this for 30 plus years, lots of experience across consulates around the world, fluent French, English, Spanish, very close to fluent. And it's just a wealth of knowledge that Larry has that Larry's gracious enough to share it with the world in today's live stream and what will be posted to YouTube. So Larry, maybe before we dive into the E-2 visa and ways that you can move to the US through investment, it'd be good just to give a little background how you ended up in the US.
Well, that's very kind. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Patrick, for the opportunity to speak to you and your audience. It's a pleasure always to talk to people who are really interested and who are serious about coming to immigrate to the United States. I often tell people that they can certainly access me on Larry time. Larry time means that they're ready with a bag in the hand, wanting to come to our beautiful Sunshine State. I grew up in Montreal, Canada, where I spent 18 wonderful winters. And at the end of 1977, I said, that's enough. And I moved to South Florida, to Fort Lauderdale, after having gone to McGill University and University of Montreal for my undergraduate education and my first law degree. And I was the first Canadian, actually, to be recycled here in Florida to go to Nova Southeastern University and graduate from there. And then the Canadian dollar was on par with the American dollar at that time. And so we decided to open up our own practice. And since 1979, we've been working in U.S. immigration. And we are AV rated, preeminent by Martindale-Hubbell in immigration. It's a big honor. We have a beautiful office here in downtown Fort Lauderdale, where we've been for the last 35 years, been in practice for 42 years. And we have had the privilege of being able to travel around the world, thanks to the clients and the immigration work, to over 41 embassies and consulates around the world, which gives us a very, very different, unique, upfront perspective of what the clients can expect when they go to different embassies and consulates to get their visas. So behind me is quite a team. They're not here tonight because it's almost 7:30 and I'm the only one lighting the fire. So we're just, we've got a business plan writer who is very specialized in E-2 matters. We have a team of seasoned senior immigration attorneys who are here. We have accountants. And the key is that we try to walk with the client throughout the process. We make sure that the client understands everything ahead of time and that we walk with them. So we surround them by professionals such as yourself, Patrick, accountants, bankers, realtors, anybody that they would need, other attorneys that they would need, tax people, tax advisors. Last year, we represented about half a dozen Canadian billionaires. We had to make sure that their tax situation was clear before doing their visa work, which we did successfully. And so it's just a litany of work that's done to make sure that everybody lands properly. But once they make the decision, we're ready to go. We normally need about a 6-month period to allow the client to be able to prepare their case, for us to be able to build it, and for us to be able to present it. And depending on the embassy or the consulate, it can either go quickly or a little bit slower. But generally speaking, a 6-month period is fine. I appreciate your endorsement. Our firm represents the investors who make acquisitions of the franchises. We are totally independent of thought and of action. And what we try to do is we try to allow the client not only to work through the legal aspects, but the psychological aspects of immigration. I'm a double immigrant. I'm very proud to be now a dual national, and I'd like to be able to share my experience with everybody who's been around the world. Tonight, we have a lot of people from around the world who are on this call. Recently, I don't know if there are any Canadian listeners, but the situation in Canada has gotten a little bit tenuous. And so our phone has been really ringing off the hook with a lot of Canadian clients who are looking to come to the Sunshine State. And I'm not talking about people who are seniors like myself, but more people who are in their 30s and 40s.
Notice a lot of young families.
Yeah.
It's like you hear about the weather, taxes,
Yeah.
how you raise your kids, having more independence, and
That's right.
Florida checks a lot of those boxes.
It checks off a lot of boxes. And with your help, Patrick, you've been able to allow people that structure and that help to be able to bridge between their country and the United States, because consuls love franchises. They find the franchises to be a business in a box, and a business in a box means that someone has already reviewed the structure. The franchisor normally reviews the structure before they offer it to franchisees. So you have a litany of 40 or 50 franchises that you can look at that are qualified, that are secure. And so we do recommend clients who are not sure about where to invest to look at the franchise option. They can invest it in any form of corporate structure, whether it be a company, a limited liability company, an incorporation, a partnership, individually. Consuls don't care about that. What they want is they want you to bring your capital to America, and they want prospectively for you to hire American workers. There's no obligation by law to hire an American worker from the beginning. Our business plans project for future growth, and thereby future growth means future employment.
Larry, how have you seen like buying an existing business? We've had some clients that buy an existing franchise, generally directly from a corporation, the franchisor, not an individual. But have you done many of those cases that they buy an existing business, like a non-franchise business in Florida?
Yes, there have been many E-2 investors. There are over 160 countries around the world that are qualified for E-2 investor status. You can find that list on my website, e2lawyer.com, e2lawyer.com. And so a lot of people want to be sure that what they're buying is going to be a good investment. I mean, it's not a small amount of capital that they're putting into it.
What are we talking about? 150, 200K?
Yeah, usually about 150,000 is about what we start the threshold at. Anything above that is fine. But to compare a franchise to an existing business, I often tell people that if they're buying an existing business, you better bring an accountant with you, because they have to go through the books. And even if they go through the books, you're never sure about the legitimacy or the accuracy of the books. So you have a choice with a franchise to start off with a clean slate, or to acquire an existing business. But I must say that from what I've seen, the acquisition of an existing business is relatively small. I would say less than 20%.
We see it takes a lot of time, where franchising generally it's 2 to 3 month process, because you have all the data. We have a data company that it is that we get the franchise information, but getting that existing business information, and it's nothing to knock on existing business. You can spend 1 to 2 years and you probably will find a great business to buy. But it's 1 to 2 years to find that business, and you're paying an accountant 3, 4, 5K every time you do a due diligence. So I think it's just good to know what you're getting into. And if you have that time horizon, it's definitely a good option to explore. But if you're looking for something that's more immediate, if you have that startup and you're very confident about it, go for that. If you don't already have something kind of you're set on, a franchise could be a nice bridge and a soft.
Yeah, you're right. It's also the surprises. It always looks good from the outside, and it could even look good after you've had your due diligence period. But then when you get into the business, you see surprises that come up. And so we recommend on any transaction where our clients are buying an existing business to have a business lawyer to support them in that process, because it could end up being quite a surprise along the way.
Yeah. And I mean, even if you have an agreement where the seller is not going to go in like a like industry, if he goes in a like industry, you then got to litigate, and that's no fun.
No.
So like your first year in the US, you're suing a guy who started a similar kind of concept. So
No, that's why we like the franchise concept. The franchise concept, you have a franchise disclosure document, an FDD, which is presented by the franchisor. It basically lays out all the rules and obligations and regulations of the franchisor with the franchisee. And then you're free to contact the franchisees that are already in the field.
yeah, I
And be able
mean,
to get
we
in
have
touch
some
with them.
clients that talk to 15 franchisees. You can contact current ones and then former ones. And we
Right.
have all that contact information. So, you can see 3, 4, 5 that have left the system, 5, 10 that are currently in the system, and hear from them directly if they would do it again, essentially.
Exactly, and a lot of them do buy multiple locations. A
And
lot
that's
of
a good sign. If
yeah, a
someone's
lot of
owning 2, 3, 4
franchisees.
locations, I mean, that's a testament that something's working.
Yeah, and very often there are families that join together to buy either one location or multiple locations of franchises.
Yeah, Larry, maybe that'd be good to just talk about kind of the E-2 visa options, because we've seen a lot of families where you have in-laws, 2 investors, maybe from Canada or elsewhere, that are getting investor visas, and they're bringing managers on the E-2 visa. So maybe
Yeah,
it'd be good just to talk a little bit about that. There's the investor visa, and then there's also managers that you could potentially bring to your business.
so you're right. I mean, people don't realize that the E-2 visa is probably the most powerful non-immigrant visa that exists in the panoply of existing visas that the United States government grants. The E-2 number one, as I mentioned, has 160 countries that can apply. Many people have dual nationalities. They have, let's say, a Canadian nationality and an Italian nationality, or maybe they're Brazilian. They also have an Italian nationality. So we use the nationality that's effective. And the E-2 visa is normally a 5-year visa, and it can be revalidated at the end of the 5 years. So long as the investment is still there, it can be extended for periods of 5 years at a time. I represent a German travel agency. Every 5 years, they come and knock on my door for an extension of the visa. This is 25 years they've been with me. I'm starting to date myself. But anyway, so the visa itself includes the spouse and all minor children under 21. Now, why is that important? Because the spouse will be able to work unlimited. She will
And
not.
that's a new change that they get it right away, right?
Yeah,
They
they
used
can
to
get
have to
it
wait
now
like 6 months to
immediately.
get
Exactly.
authorization.
Yeah, they can get a social security number immediately, and they'll be able to work right away. So that's a very important asset for the family because it creates an additional cash flow into the family.
And unemployment rate's below 4% in Florida. So, I mean,
Yes,
if you're a fluent English speaker, you should have no issue getting a job.
yes, and even if you don't speak English fluently,
Yeah,
there's a lot of possibilities.
that's well said.
Florida is really a melting pot.
Especially South Florida.
We have 22 million people in this state. It's a very populous state with a lot of diversity. Now, the visa, as I said, is a 5-year visa, but very often you see that little couch behind me. That's the couch that I put the kids on. And the reason I put the kids on it is because my goal is to really represent the kids. The
Yes.
kids are the ones who are going to be the future of the family in America. So I make sure that at the end of the first year, I knock on their door to make sure that they've started a green card process to be able to segue into something more permanent for the family before the 5-year
And
period
there's so
runs
many
out.
options for green card. Like, you hear a lot about the EB-5 visa. It's in the news because it's like big hotels and real estate projects. And I think that's an amazing option for some investors and some folks. But maybe you could walk through a couple options for people that don't have 500K sitting in their bank account and how they could maybe get a green card.
Well, a lot of people don't have the 500K, but they have good resumes. And so what we do, what's called a labor certification, we demonstrate that there are no Americans who are ready, willing, or able to undertake a certain type of job. And that's a 2-year process. But at the end of the 2 years, they will receive a green card. And so to be able to do that, they must find a qualified employer who would be willing to sponsor them at the end of the 2-year cycle. So that's why it's important. Now, when you're talking about the E-2 visa, there are many families who want to come together. Depending on the amount of the investment and the type of investment, either we can bring them in as partners into the same business, they can own 50-50, or they can acquire a second location or a second franchise.
And what is, I mean, you hear different processing times, and we see some clients like anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks. What are you seeing in some of the more popular consulate posts that you have clients going to, like in Toronto, for example?
Well, our clients are really from around 60 different countries. We
Yeah.
represent a lot of clients from all parts of the world. And depending on their home base, we will be able to assess whether or not it's going to be quick or whether it's going to be slow. So for Toronto, for example, it happens to be relatively fast. Why? Because they've streamlined the operation to allow electronic filing of the cases. So once we're done with our 3-month due diligence in preparing the file, the consul in Toronto will normally take about 2 weeks to review the case, and then we could go ahead and schedule. Now, up until last year, we had the COVID challenge. That challenge is starting to dissipate, thankfully, and so we're now able to approve our clients that have been backlogged, and we've had a tremendous January with 6 approvals in a row. One of our clients set a record, 6 minutes at the window, and that was a record for our office. But he did it, and so we're very proud of them.
Talk about the window. Like, so you prepare the case, and that's part of it, but they're essentially selling that they're a great investor for the U.S. to have, right?
Yeah, you have to be able to show, and that's really the value of for my history, really, because I've visited these 41 embassies and consulates, and I've been inside them. Most Canadians have not been inside a consulate or embassy to get a visa. So what I help with is not only the legal aspects, but the psychological aspects to be able to help the client go through this journey together with me. It's very important for me to make sure that they're calm, collected, precise, and crisp when they go into the consulate to give their pitch, because they only have 2 minutes to give their pitch as to who they are, why they're there, and why their project will be successful. The consul wants to see the applicant be successful, and that's really central to the pitch.
And what do they see? That they have experience, that the concept, the business plan has the potential to be successful?
Yes, and it's very, very nice to be able to refer to the business plan during the interview. But at the end of the day, as the consul is not giving you eye contact. What he's doing is he's listening to you through the hole that's in the bulletproof window. So he's not making eye contact with you. He's looking at the screen in front of you. So what you say to the consul through that hole in the window is very, very vital and very critical, and they will evaluate that. They may look at you really quickly just to kind of give you a quick eye view, but really what they're doing is they're evaluating your documentation, how well and professionally it's been prepared, and they want to be sure that what you're telling them is going to give them comfort to issue their visa, because they're signing off on that visa. That officer is signing off on that visa. So you want to be sure that you're giving them your best foot forward.
Do you see like some consulates are harder to get approved than others?
Yes, there are certain consulates where there's a lot of visa fraud that's involved, and therefore there are high denials. We do not touch those consulates and embassies. We do not touch those nationalities. We only touch clients that we have a reasonable, high level of expectation of success of the file, both in terms of the client and the location. So, for example, we've handled clients in London, fine. We get through very well. Toronto, very, very well. But we've had challenges in certain places like Paris. In Bern in Switzerland, we're very comfortable. It just depends on the location of the residence.
Yeah, I mean, we've had issues in Egypt and Pakistan where like it's just significantly harder than a client going into Toronto, for example.
Yeah. And we had a client this afternoon. He said to me, "Well, Larry, I'm absolutely committed to coming to Florida. Should I sell my house now?" So I said, "Well, hold on a second. We have to file your visa first." Okay?
I mean, it shows he trusts you. If he's like, I'm selling everything.
Vote of confidence, but I'm not the guy at the gate, So, so I'm just the guy who's issuing the ticket, So I have the keys to the kingdom, though. That's true. So I said to him, "Look, the best thing to do is to do a market search. See what your house is worth, because I only need the person to have a location in their home country to be able to file their case. It could be a room in a hotel, as far as I'm concerned. But it doesn't have to be a $2 million.
Talking about home country, like we've had a lot of Brazilian multinationals. Like imagine a Brazilian that has an Italian passport.
Yes.
And he's going to be the main applicant, and the spouse has a Spanish passport.
Yes.
Like, how do you recommend? How do you navigate that? Like, where they're going to apply from? Because I imagine it's Brazil, Italy, Spain, and then who applies?
So that's a good question. So the where they apply is the easy one. That is based on their last place of residence and where they have the greatest amount of ties. So I wouldn't put a Brazilian in Rome or in Madrid if they don't live there. It really would have to be a very desperate situation of relocation. So that's easy. And as I mentioned before, a lot of people have dual nationalities, and we choose the passport that is approved, and the consuls have no problem with that. They will approve a case with a correct passport of the individual. It just so happens that you mentioned two countries that are qualified. Spain and Italy are both qualified. We had a case in Sao Paulo about a year ago where our client was Brazilian, but he also happened to have an Italian passport. So we used the Italian passport to make the application. Now, who do you choose between spouses to make the application? That's very personal to the couple. And by the way, when I say couple, I mean the couple. They have to be married to be able to both qualify for the investor visa. If they're not
civil
married,
union doesn't fly.
Independent.
If they're living together, or civil union, that doesn't count.
No, civil unions are not recognized by U.S. law, and they have to be married to be able to apply and benefit from the E-2. Now, why is that important? Because you want to be sure that the person who's going to be working independently and have the total freedom is going to be free to be able to be another bread earner for the family. Now, it's all the children are included under 21, but they're not going to be able to work. So until they get their green cards, which is why we try to encourage green cards as soon as possible. So the E-2 is an important visa, but the selection of it is really based on the resume of the individuals as well as their ability to execute the business plan properly. They must.
So if someone hasn't worked for 10 years, like they might have some issues at the window getting the E-2 visa, or how would you handle that?
No. Normally, as long as the person has at least 3 years of experience in some business transaction and or a diploma from a university or a college or something along those lines, just to demonstrate that the individual will succeed in their plan.
And how about, like, what are the rights for the kids, like state tuition? It got brought to my attention, like there's some countries in the world, like where if you have a kid on the spectrum or special needs kids, they're not welcome. Where the US, we've had many clients that have moved here for that exact reason. Yeah. So maybe you could talk a little bit about all those kids that have sat on your couch behind you.
Yeah. So the good news is that those kids can go to any school, public or private, under 21. The schools, at least in elementary school, middle, and high school, are obliged to receive the children automatically in the school. Of course, college and university, they have to be admitted. And unfortunately, they will be paying international school rates. They will not be paying domestic rates because they're still considered to be international. Now, once they turn 21 and they fall off of the E-2, they must revert to an F1 student visa. So it's a little bit tricky when one of the children is 20 years old or 19 years old. So we make sure that the client gets aligned for the children at that point in time.
And I mean, what shocked me, and my brother and I started this 2015, not in 1979, where you have much more experience in space than us, but we've had very few E-2 visa renewals. So you're saying that most of the time one of the spouse will generally do a perm and gets employment somewhere, and they get a green card that way?
Yes, they will get a perm. They get a labor certification. One of the two spouses, we will review both resumes, and the key is to find an employer that would be willing to sponsor them in the United States. And we have 6 handy-dandy questions that we ask the employer before starting the process to make sure that the employer is qualified. Ostensibly, the employee or the client, our client, is qualified before we even start. But the employer needs to be qualified. For example, they must have at least a financial statement to show that they made a profit of $70,000 a year. They must be willing to interview American applicants. They must be willing to publicize in the newspaper, put up job postings in their office. There's a whole litany of things that they must say yes to before we even start the case. Once they say yes, then we're off to the races.
Larry, before we dive in, because we have a lot of questions from those that are watching over YouTube or Facebook or even LinkedIn, were there any other points that you'd like to go through on the E-2 visa?
I think that it's very, very powerful in the sense that it gives the most flexibility to the person, the applicant, because we've had clients, we've done hundreds of E-2 visas, and what we've noticed is that if you're talking about freedom of action and freedom of activity in the US, the E-2 visa is the solution. I've had clients who use the E-2 visa every day. They're cross-border. They live on the border of Canada and the United States. They use it every day. I've had other E-2 holders who use it twice a year. They come in and out, and that's it. But basically, for 5 years, you'll be here in the United States to develop your own business, travel freely, to be able to work here, get a social security number here, and really become part of the fabric of the United States.
Well said. And I had just a quick question before we jump into the questions that the listeners are asking. For the E-2 visa applicant, from the time they start looking at businesses, they invest, they have the visa, what have you seen is something that they weren't expecting that causes some frustration in the process? That had they known that up front, the process could have gone smoother?
No, that doesn't happen with us. It doesn't happen with us for a very simple reason. All the information is given to the client before we're engaged, and then there's a checklist. We have a very unusual system, Patrick, and you probably know it better than anyone.
Yeah, no, I've heard a lot. I've seen the checklist. Our clients talk about the checklist.
But we start off with the answer, and we work into the question.
Yeah.
So when you start off with the answer, you pretty much know where the case is going, right?
And they have all that information up front. You're transparent. We need all this.
Yes.
And it's for your own good. I want to maintain a super high approval rate.
And clients won't be able to get us all the documents. And if they can't get us all the documents, it's okay, because we're going to get them for them. You know, we'll make sure that the file is complete. We don't submit a file unless it's complete. It's got to be complete. It's our name that's going on it. We have a reputation with all the different consulates and embassies around the world.
I mean, they recognize your last name, and I mean.
Yep, that's part of it.
So let's dive into a couple of the questions.
You should say that. It's funny because we had a situation in the early 1990s where we got 16 approvals in a row, and so the consul pulled me in. He said, Larry, what's going on? You know, how come you got 16 approvals in a row? We get turned down all the time. So I said to him, listen, Mr. Consul, I said, you see this face and you see the file, the two have got to match. I said, if they don't match, I'm not interested.
Exactly.
So P.S. after file number 25, I get a phone call. Larry, I retired from the State Department. Can I come work for you? So God bless him. This consul worked for us for 10 years.
He flew all around the world for you, right?
He flew all around the world instead of me. He did very well. And it was very beneficial to the clients and to us to have somebody of stature, you know, to be able to represent us. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's great. Good segue. You know, Kamal has a question. If I
apply, here's a good question from Kamal. Really good question. If you apply for an E-2 in Toronto, when will the interview with the consulate be expected? So first of all, the processing of the actual case itself will take about 2 weeks for the consulate to review it. Now, here's a little trick that you need to know. When you schedule the appointment, it could be months away. It could be 4 months away or 5 months away, even though since November, they've started to catch up on the backlog and they're doing much, much better in Toronto than they were 2 months ago. However, what I tell my clients to do is to monitor the calendar on a daily basis, and they'll be able to move it up. Because what happens is that people cancel or they get rescheduled. So you can jump on that slot, take that slot, and I've seen cases 30 days, 40 days.
So you gotta be on top of it.
Yeah, you
If you
just
want
have
to
to
get
be
your
on
kids
top of
here
it.
in August, you gotta be on top of it.
That's right. That's right.
And from Rodrigo, is it better to start your own business or buy an existing business? Maybe Larry, you could take it from an immigration perspective, and I can talk from just a general.
Yeah.
If it
So,
makes more
from
business sense
an
for that.
immigration perspective, it's either one. Of course, the risk of creating your own business is that you have a lot of question marks. You don't know how the market's going to react unless you've done your market research ahead of time. An existing business will tell you where it is, but from a visa perspective, it doesn't matter. Either way is fine.
Yeah, I say starting your own independent business, if you're very confident and you're already doing business in the United States, then go for it. And if you've already worked in the US, you're doing business in the US, you can create the entity in the US. Like Larry and I had a client where he talked to us first, and I'm like, hey, you're already doing business in the US. You don't need us. You can just go right to Larry and he can get your E-2 visa. So it's going to be case by case. And buying an existing business, if you're not buying from a corporate entity, it's that due diligence process that Larry was saying, especially in South Florida, where sadly people are paying their employees in cash. Contractors should actually be W-2 employees when they're not. So you have some tax liability as well as employment liability for a lot of these businesses for sale under 500K. It's different when you're buying from the franchisor for 200, 300K because it's a corporation and they have a lot to lose. But if you're buying an existing business from an individual, you got to have that accountant by your side every step of the way to just make sure that you're not exposed.
That's a good question. Christina, thank you for your question. Are you required to be in the US to start the E-2 process? Actually, no. We have a lot of clients, for example, who are not vaccinated and they want to start their process, and we accept their cases for two reasons. First of all, there's no reason not to. Third of all, it takes about 3 months to build the case anyway. And so depending on their timeline, we will start the case whether they're in the US or not. We like clients to come to the US to do their own due diligence on the ground. But that being said, we have many clients who will stay in their home country and then go ahead to the embassy or consulate to have their matters processed and approved.
One quick question on the vaccination side, and hopefully we don't, like, our YouTube channel doesn't go away, but are there ways like that you can, if you have some autoimmune disease or some medical reason not to get a vaccine, that you can still get the E-2 visa and not be vaccinated?
Okay, so that's two questions in one. Congratulations, Patrick. So so the first answer is you do not need to be vaccinated to attend a consular interview. So whether you're vaccinated or not, remember that bulletproof plate glass window that I was telling you about, that's protection for the consul from anything that you may bring into the consulate. So there's no need to be vaccinated to enter the consulate. The problem is when you've gotten the visa, which is issued a week after the interview, by the way, then the person will have a problem crossing the border coming into the United States if they're not vaccinated. So we're hopeful that with the walls coming down next month and the month after between the United States and Canada, that issue will disappear as well.
Interesting. And for now, it doesn't matter if it's land or air; it's kind of the same restriction.
Yes, it is. Although the officer at the border posts have been ordered not to admit anybody by land if they haven't been vaccinated. By air, it's almost discretionary on part of the officer.
Okay. And then next question was Sophia. Can I use borrowed funds for the investment?
Yes, that's a great question because I haven't seen that question in a while. So the short answer is yes, as long as the funds end up in your account in your home country and then are transferred to your corporate account here in the United States, whether the funds are borrowed or gifted. A lot of people make the investment from a gift and so or savings. So they can use that for the investment, but definitely I had a client from Peru yesterday. He also happens to have a Croatian passport, which qualifies. And he's going to go to his bank. He's going to borrow the money from the bank. He's going to put it into his account, and he's going to use that to acquire a franchise in Florida.
So William is asking, what would be a good Canadian dollar amount for Canadians applying for the E-2 visa?
I would say that you need to budget about 150 to 200,000 Canadian to be able to qualify. And what we do, however, is that we will work with you to develop the capital stack. Okay, the capital stack can be a composition of the amount of the investment, the reserve in the account, legal fees and costs, whatever is involved in initiating the transaction or the visa application are included in the capital stack. So that's where the funding would come, and our business plan writer and us work with you to make sure that it's done properly and completely. Can the E-2 visa holder study in the US? So the short answer is yes. There's nothing to prevent an E-2 holder from attending classes, but it should not be the primary purpose of the stay in the United States. So you're allowed to remain physically in the United States up to 2 years at a time. I mentioned before that the visa period was issued for 5 years, but the actual stay in the United States per visit is 2 years. So that means you need to step out of the United States at least once every 2 years and then be able to come back. Most people really like the fact that I tell them to go to the Bahamas for the night and then come back. And that works out very well. But the short answer is yes. And not only can you study while you're in the United States, I encourage it, because what happens is that it's going to improve your situation should you wish to go for a revalidation.
Another follow-up question on education. Can the children of E-2 visa holders attend school?
Yeah. So the answer is yes. Yeah.
And then how about the spouse? We went through on the E-2 visa. Can they work? Can the kids work?
No, the kids cannot work, but the spouse will be able to work through what's called an employment authorization document. Yes, if you're living in Vancouver, you can apply through the Toronto Consulate. As a matter of fact, sometimes I recommend it because on initial applications, Toronto seems to be the go-to consulate. We just did a case for Vancouverite, and it worked out very, very well, but we did it through Toronto. They invested in Arizona. You know, everybody seems to go lateral. So people in British Columbia and Calgary and Alberta, they seem to go south to Arizona, New Mexico, whatever. And so, but the consulate in Toronto is responsible for the E-2 visas primarily. By the way, for you folks who live in Montreal, the U.S. consulate in Montreal, before COVID, I think again, will be in a position to accept a revalidation of a visa, not an initial application, but a revalidation. Okay, so this is a great question because there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace, and it's really easy to understand why there's a confusion between E-2 and EB-5. Okay, so think of it this way: E-2 is a non-immigrant visa, and EB-5 is an immigrant visa. The immigrant visa, the EB-5, requires the $1 million and 10 employees, but the E-2 does not require that amount of money or employees. Basically 150,000 or more is about right. And it's not even a dollar amount. It's connected to the substantiality of the investment. So if you have an investment that's worth $1 million, but you invest only 50,000, it's not going to work. But if you have an investment that's worth 75,000 and you invested 75,000, that's 100% of the substantiality, and that will work. So, but you also have to be sure that there's enough cash flow coming out of the business, and that's usually demonstrated through the business plan, to be able to qualify for it.
Let's take one more question. Then I just want to show those that are watching a few tools that they can utilize to find and analyze different businesses for the E-2 visa. So the last question from Gabriel: I'm a New Zealand citizen but live and work in Germany. Can I apply in Germany for the E-2 visa?
So the short answer is yes. I was in New Zealand 2 years ago. It's a beautiful country. And so, but if you are stationed abroad, in other words, if your residence has been transferred to another country other than your natural home country, and you can demonstrate that you have residential ties to that country, such as Germany, then you can apply in Frankfurt and be able to get the visa there. We've done that in Frankfurt also many times.
All right. So I just wanted to go through quickly a few different tools that those that are interested in buying a business or buying a franchise for their E-2 or even EB-5 investor visa can utilize for free. Some free information on Embedded Biz, where we have a database of every franchise available that's seeking current franchisees. That includes franchises that compensate franchise brokers. That includes franchises that don't compensate franchise brokers. It includes great franchises. It includes bad franchises. One thing that I really like to look at is just the failure rate. How many are closing? So Subway, everyone knows Subway. Unfortunately, well, maybe it's for the best. They don't accept E-2 visa investors. And they're closing a lot of locations. So it's a Miami-based company. They moved down from Canada a couple of years back. I wouldn't recommend anyone invest in this concept. They've closed 7,000 locations in the last 4 years. And I imagine the 2021 data that's going to come out, and I could see it even hitting 2,000 plus. So we have information on every franchise publicly available. And we're constantly scraping information to get more and more data. And a key thing is, if I say a failure rate's 21% over the last 3 years, what does that mean? If you don't have a basis and benchmarking, it doesn't mean much. But you can see here with a Subway, 17% of people are transferring, or the franchisor reacquires that location. And the failure rate, franchises that are terminated, non-renewals, or they cease operations, 21%. So you're seeing in a 3-year period, 38% of the franchisees are either shutting down or selling their location. And that's pretty high when you consider the industry median 6%. Like Larry was alluding to, usually if the business is going well, you're opening more locations and you're scaling up. And yeah, maybe you're bringing a manager on the E-2 visa from your country to help run those subsequent locations. And then the failure rate, we can see for the industry, food and beverage, 3-year is 12%, and for all franchises is 11%. So double the average when you look at the 3-year or even the 1-year failure rate for Subway. At Visa Franchise, we produce lists of 50 popular franchises not eligible for the E-2 visa. That includes a lot of big household names where you generally have to already have a green card and U.S. work experience. And many times there's not even territory available. I love Domino's. I've invested a lot in Domino's stock. The stock's gone up like 2,000% over like a 10-year period. Incredible company, but you have to be working at a Domino's to own a Domino's. So, it's not about the visa. It's just Domino's wants to recruit within. Chick-fil-A generally recruiting within. There's a lot. UPS Store does not accept E-2 visa investors. Every week, someone's asking about UPS Store. They don't accept E-2 visa investors. So we have a list of franchises that don't accept E-2 visa investors that we get asked a lot about, as well as we have a list of those that do accept E-2 visa investors. And in our experience, about 70% of franchises that accept E-2 visa investors. And as I mentioned, Vetted Biz is a portal where it's a free service, as well as you have premium features that you pay a relatively low monthly fee. And then for those clients that want us to be by their side every step of the way, engage our advisory practice at Visa Franchise, where we're able to do a custom search and be with the client every step of the way alongside Larry and his colleagues. So a few different options to look. Vetted Biz is a good place to get started, though, and kind of browse through different franchises or even businesses for sale. I think we have like 3,000 plus businesses across the United States, but principally in Florida. So those are some good resources to start your search from. And then we're always available to have a consultation to review your case and to see if a franchise might be a good fit based on what you're looking for. And a good place also, the YouTube videos, and then our podcast channel. We have, if you search on Spotify, it's basically the #1 franchise podcast. And we produce an episode every day where we're going through franchises, like what happened to Quiznos. They had 4,500 locations. Now they're down to 250. We go through McDonald's, Krispy Kreme, some smaller concepts like Cinnaholic, which our clients have invested in successfully for the E-2 visa. And we're also interviewing founders of some of the largest franchise systems, as well as some up-and-coming brands that have great potential. So those are some resources you can leverage as you start thinking about businesses for your E-2 visa. And visa franchise, again, it's a much closer working relationship where you're going to interact with myself as well as 2 of my colleagues, an assistant and client manager. And then Vetted Biz is more autonomous, and I'd recommend, and if you're already living in the United States and you already have U.S. work experience, you could potentially just do it yourself. But if you haven't lived in the United States, you haven't done business in the United States, we can generally save you a lot of time and money analyzing different concepts that might be a good fit for you and your family.
Thank you, Patrick. If I could just add one more thing that I omitted from our initial conversation. We've talked a lot about the E-2 principal investor, which is correct and which is fine, but we didn't talk about the specialized employee. There is a category called the E-2 specialized employee. These are people that you were alluding to who are brought from abroad by the principal investor to either run or to develop or help the U.S. entity in developing its enterprise. And a lot of these people are specialized in the sense that they have knowledge and nuance about the business to be able to support and help the principal investor. Now, these specialized employees are also vetted by the U.S. consulate in their home country, and they are reviewed, their resumes and letters of recommendation, etc., are reviewed by the consulate to be able to bring down either a specialized employee who has a niche understanding of the business or executives of the company. So it's really important because on the L1 visa, there are all sorts of limitations and restrictions on what type of managers or executives can be brought. The E-2 does not have these restrictions. They are able to bring them in rather quickly into the U.S. to help the business develop, and their visas have the same duration as the investor. It could also be valid for 5 years, with the thought that they will be able to train other American workers to take their place eventually. That's the thinking behind the specialized employee.
Larry, any concluding thoughts before we wrap this up?
We never wrap it up, Patrick. It's always an ongoing thing. It's very important for clients who are making this very important family decision to confer with us. We offer a consultation, a 1-hour Zoom consultation with our clients for the fee of $350. They can call our office and schedule whenever they want a consultation with us to be able to review their case before they plunge into any decisions or any formality. And then we can make a decision together. And they will know that I walk the journey with them throughout the whole process. It's not a long process. It will not be an arduous process. I know that you're scared, and I know that you're concerned, but we do walk it with you, and we will make sure that you're successful.
Well said, Larry. So again, thanks a lot for doing this event in English and then earlier today in French. And who knows, the next one we'll probably have to do it in Spanish. I see a lot of the participants are from all over Latin America.
Excellent.
Appreciate it, Larry. Thanks again.
My pleasure.
And thanks for all those that joined.